you ready, kids?
Hello, it's Employee Million, and welcome back to SpongeComs. Today's episodes are Season 3, Episode 6, or Episode 46 overall, Snowball Effect, and One Krabs Trash, both of which originally aired on Nickelodeon on February 22nd, 2002. Kind of odd that they aired such a winter-themed episode this late into winter, like literally the last week of the season, but it's better than airing Survival of the Idiots in spring. That's kind of a trend I noticed because they also aired Suds, which had a bit of an icy feel in January. But I don't know what the exact reasoning was for each of these, but I digress. Snowball Effect was written by Paul Tibbett, Kent Osborne, and Meriwether Williams, and its title is a pun because you've got an episode about a snowball fight, makes total sense, but Snowball Effect is like a term for escalation. Don't know if it has like a triple meaning like domino effect, but yeah, pretty clever title, pretty good name for any episode of a cartoon set in like a snowy wonderland setting. And here we see Bikini Bottom in the wintertime, and it's very snowy. I don't think this is the very first time we've seen snow in the show because, you know, Christmas Who, Survival of the Idiots, Suds, obviously. But this is the first time it, like, covers the land, and the justification for this is really funny. Like, they have this live-action iceberg come over and just slowly drip onto it. And the jokes they make are funny, like the Santa hats and the innuendo of the two boys carrying like very round globes while trying to decorate a chestless mermaid. Yeah, surprised that got past the censors. But as you can see, these first 2 minutes, they have a lot of fun with, you know, taking these characters and putting them in a snowy setting. And I think if I had one problem with this episode, it's that I really wish we saw more of that. Like, I know Christmas Who kind of had a lot of a wintry vibe, but we could have had more of, you know, Mr. Krabs doing something or Mrs. Puff doing something. But you know what? I'm happy with the episode we got. It is pretty paint by numbers, Season 3 Squidward rivalry episode, but that's not a bad thing. It's still great in the grand scheme of things. And it's kind of like the Fry Cook Games, but without as much angst in SpongeBob and Patrick's rivalry. That's the thing I do really kind of enjoy about SpongeBob and Patrick's, you know, face-off in this episode. And up here we're going to see a painted background with a bit of an error. You see the close-up on the DNA, snow DNA. The sky is a very different color than it is in winter. It's the usual summery, you know, color aesthetic. But yeah, I do like this sort of battle here. I've never been in a snowball fight, so I can't vouch for if this is realistic, like if snowballs actually work. Because, you know, down here, it's scorching even in July sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I think that this is given the right amount of time to grow and blossom, but I still think that they could have put it later in the episode because I do kind of find this episode to be a bit oddly paced. Like, you've got this complication, and this feels like the second act of the episode, but we're still really just getting started. And then it ends, and then we've got the Squidward stuff, and right as that's heating up, the episode just ends. But overall, I still find there to be a lot of fun had in what they were able to accomplish here. Obviously, not every episode's going to be a winner, but this is still good. I guess it is kind of that I haven't got a lot of time to really understand what winter's about. You've got a lot of good gags like SpongeBob just turning himself into a machine gun here. I do think that the bit of Patrick eating the snowballs goes on a bit long, but I get the point. This means war. And I do really think that was a pretty interesting direction for this show to go in, that SpongeBob and Patrick are basically on opposing sides of a little snowball war. Because you think of SpongeBob, you think of a pretty chill, peaceful guy who loves jellyfishing, doesn't love big business. You know, sort of soft liberal folk. And then, they're going at it like it's Nam. And I mean, Sandcastles in the Sand goes in this direction a lot heavier, so I can't really, analyze it too hard when it's just this. But, war isn't the only joke. You've also got the neato running gag of one Snowball always hitting the fire in Squidward's lounge. And I also think that Squidward kind of enters the episode at the right time. He is kind of present from the beginning, but now they've found a use for him to be here. And usually this would be around the third act, like when they're have to escalate further, then cool things down. But we're only about halfway through the episode. I think one little detail that I wish they could have kept in the episode for a little longer was SpongeBob's Santa hat near the start of the episode, because I think that's pretty cute. He's only recently found out who Santa is, so, would have been fun to see that sort of thing to quickly identify the episode just based on SpongeBob's look, like his beach gear in the beach episodes. And here we have SpongeBob and Patrick signing their first treaty. I think the second one is in Two Thumbs Down. They fight and then make up a lot, which I think makes for good friendship. Oh, and we've also got this nice little Who's on First-esque, routine coming up of Squidward being someone, Patrick being someone, and SpongeBob being Mr. Krabs. I think now should be a good time to just bask in this nice, sort of aesthetic that they made for this episode, because whenever an episode changes aesthetics like that, it generally goes a bit underappreciated because people focus a lot more on the story and characters and jokes. But background artists do deserve a lot of credit too, and man, this episode has a vibe all its own with just the dim, cloudy sky, and instead of, beige sand, it's all white snow. I think depending on your feelings on winter, this might either be like a very captivating look or a very depressing one. I mean, that's basically what a SpongeBob versus Squidward episode should feel like. You should either be on SpongeBob's side, having this childlike joy, or relate to Squidward and his, more adult view on the situation. Like, what I find interesting is that this episode is just about Squidward wanting SpongeBob and Patrick to fight, even though that doesn't make that much sense because then they'd be annoying him more. Like, the justification is he wants SpongeBob's brain knocked out, but that's a gag. The fun bit is seeing Squidward, get so wrapped up in the fight that he ends up going nuts. And we're reaching that point now. And the fun part, another interesting thing to me is that they almost went a lot further with this. Like, there was a cutscene that one of the animators or storyboard artists, maybe Jay Lender, posted to Twitter a couple years ago of Squidward in this snow dungeon with, like, snowmen being tortured, and I think one of them was decapitated. And while that is very dark, and I think that Nickelodeon censors might have had a problem with that for obvious reasons, I think part of it is also that they had a good idea for an episode, but then kind of spent a bit too long on the setup, or not enough time on the setup. Like, they had two great ideas here, SpongeBob and Patrick going to war and Squidward going to war. And just had enough time to only focus on one or the other. And, if they're gonna do a torture chamber gag again like they did in Suds, then I think it was kind of wise for them to just make the Squidward stuff the end and the SpongeBob and Patrick War the major focus for the second act. I don't know. It feels like this episode ran a bit long in storyboard sessions, or maybe during a final cut. Don't want to speculate, but maybe this episode had to be substantially, edited or cut. But it's still a fun episode. I still really like it. I still like this irony of Squidward getting so wrapped up in the Snowball fight that he ends up, barricading himself from reality. This episode's functionally sound, but I do feel the pacing is a bit odd. And I think that's a nice place to end my little, commentary over the episode. It's good. What else have I got in my notes? Neat. The last thing I have in my notes is neat. And I think that just about says it. One Krabs Trash. This was written by Paul Tibbett again, alongside Kaz and Marco here. And this is an episode that I kind of appreciate more with age, the more it says about money. Mr. Krabs has been a thing for 3 seasons now, and as the episodes go on, his love of money just gets more and more, overt. Starts to become a driving force in his stories. And I think that this episode kind of solidified who he'd be and how he would be, sort of stereotyped from this point onward. Just a real cheapskate who'll try to make a quick buck out of anything. And I think it says a lot about economics and finances and how, people will pay for literal junk just as long as it's perceived to be rare and valuable. That's the thing that Mr. Krabs starts the episode doing, and as the episode goes on, he is on the receiving end of that, practice. And I think if Mr. Krabs kind of gets what he deserves in the end, then, yeah, it'll just be really fun. What I really find odd about this episode's, lasting impact is that there are episodes with a ton of memorable running gags, and One Krabs Trash is one of those, but there are also gags that just never get referenced in, public retrospect. The thing about the Swiss umbrella with holes, that's pretty clever. And there's a bit coming up with SpongeBob, going back to his house and trying to find pennies. I think that's kind of nice. A neat little montage just to show how desperate SpongeBob is for this #1 hat. And I think that this episode's legacy partially has to do with how it can relate to Steven Hillenburg. On the day of or after his passing, Nickelodeon aired promos of SpongeBob saying there's only been a couple #1s in the history of forever, relating to, Steven, the creator of SpongeBob. And since they've started, making the new spin-offs and movies, the quote of Mr. Krabs asking himself if he's going to defile a grave for money has been used in the context of Nickelodeon really going all out, being full on Land Before Time about it. It's a bit overused, but I totally understand people's hard feelings about, SpongeBob continuing on. But I digress. Back to 2002, let's see. I do really like the idea of a soda drinking hat. It feels like one of those noun game things they did in season 2, where they just pick a funny item and make a whole story out of it. And the story they picked is pretty good. Apparently this particular soda drinking hat is very rare, enough for people to pay hundreds or thousands or millions of dollars for, which isn't much of an exaggeration in today's collector economy. Like, you have to be a millionaire to collect certain things nowadays, and this gag right here kind of feels like a cautionary tale about that sort of thing. But now it's sadly the reality. And, oh, this is really adorable and in character. SpongeBob's using the soda or beer drinking hat that's associated with football stadiums and using it to blow bubbles, because remember, he's SpongeBob, he blows bubbles. That's what he does. And all the gags here are pretty great. SpongeBob wondering if he looks like a pretty girl, and his flashback of what he did while, you know, Mr. Krabs is trying to ask him for the hat back. And of course, the hats that Mr. Krabs bring up are also great. I don't know why. Well, I do know why, but one of them is just called Foxy Grandpa, and SpongeBob laughs really hard at that. And Mr. Krabs was sure that that would work. However, what I find really funny about this joke is that there was a poster on SpongeBuddy Mania back when I used the site called Foxy Grandpa. And I always think of that poster whenever, this gag pops up, and it just makes it funnier in a way. So all this stuff about, Mr. Krabs trying to bargain with SpongeBob, it's very nice, very, humorous. You kind of expect this from him. All these different gimmick hats have their uses. But it kind of feels a bit like Squeaky Boots in a way. You've got Mr. Krabs trying to bargain SpongeBob out of or into some sort of gimmicky item of clothing. But then we cut to night, and this episode takes on a whole new, atmosphere. It's a lot darker now. It's a little moodier. And I think that's because it's a Mr. Krabs episode. He's an adult, an adult that acts like an adult. So, yeah, this is kind of a Mr. Krabs episode, and a very good one in that regard. Still funny, but a little seedier, a little harsher, and a little more violent by the end, but not without, some SpongeBob surrealism really helping things out, like the floating shopping list, and just how quickly SpongeBob's able to, Mr. Krabs says immediately, and SpongeBob immediately digs it back up. Like, he pauses time so he can do it. And I think that the reason this episode was paired with Snowball Effect has less to do with them being made close together in the production pipeline, because I don't quite remember if they are, but more because, they both have, different colored skies, like Snowball Effect for the winter scenes, which is 90% of the episode, has a dim gray sky because, winter, cloudy, connect the dots. But then with One Krab's Trash, you've got the cemetery that Mr. Krabs goes to, and it's also pretty moody, got a green tint to it, and yeah, you can completely understand why these two episodes are paired, because they both kind of play around with the look of the backgrounds. So, yeah. And I also find it very disturbingly coincidental that this is the second time that Mr. Krabs is involved with death this season, taking Nasty Patty into account. And, Graveyard, classic setting for a cartoon. We're talking 20s and 30s. But no ghosts, because ghosts ain't real. If you can't tell, I've been watching the Cuphead show. Love it, watch it. But back to SpongeBob. You've got a lot of great jokes in the cemetery, like Squidward. I don't know how this is allowed. Squidward must have had to pay the people who own the cemetery to have a tombstone for his hopes and dreams. And I don't know why. Oh, here's the I'm with stupid gag. Second time SpongeBob's done that, but less overtly. But yeah, still, even when it's dark and moody and set in a graveyard, SpongeBob can still be really funny, like with these imagined spots of SpongeBob seeing these weird, surreal things. One constant rumor with this episode is that in the original airing, or some original airings, instead of saying, "You won't guess what I found in my sock last night," SpongeBob says, "You won't guess what I found in my pants last night." And that seems to have been an innuendo that was invented by fandom, but I don't know. Sock is even dirtier in a way. Oh, and here we have old Smitty Werber Jaegerman Jensen, or as Mr. Krabs and his gravestone incorrectly call him, Smitty Werberman Jensen. I don't know where the Jaeger comes from. I don't know why they left it in, but I don't know. I prefer the 9-syllable name, as you'll see by my question of the week. But yeah, Smitty seems to be like a very average guy. Like, he might have been number one, but he just looks like a skeleton version of pretty much any other fish in SpongeBob. Which is even weirder considering, look at all these different, fish skeleton designs. Not that fish have much of bones for their fins and all, but, you've got the swordfish, which kind of fits with this sort of Mr. Krabs pirating a old hat. I really like this fight scene. You only need a few scenes and a clever little literary reference. It's not the point of the episode, but it's a nice little action scene. And then you've got the nice little end of the episode where all that fighting Mr. Krabs did just for this hash, all that piracy, all that deception, he's got a worthless hat again. Which raises the question to me, how did he even come into possession of this hat in the first place? Must have been pearls. But yeah, really fun episode, really smart episode, very Mr. Krabs episode in a way. Also in my notes is that this is the second to last episode with SpongeBob's bed on the right side of his room, just in case you're really bothered about that. First is Help Wanted, followed by a couple season 1 episodes. Last time they ever do it is in Best Day Ever, but that's for the purpose of the window gag at the start of the episode. And this is a nice little gag to round out the episode. Really hammers home an extension of the Squidward's Hopes and Dreams thing that has become a bit of a meme. And so that was Snowball Effect and One Krabs Trash. My question of the week for you last week was, what is your favorite Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy episode? Got a lot of great answers. Bryce Form 2001, his favorite is 5 with 6 also. Third one is Man Ray, Mermaid Man vs. SpongeBob. Dasher Rose, her favorite is Mermaid Man 6 and Motion Picture in Season 4, yep. Super Seal, your favorite is the second. Magnificent SMFA, your favorite is Mermaid Man Begins. Pretty underrated one, honestly. Carmen TV, Mermaid Man Barnacle Boy 5, I shall respect your opinion as well as your authority. Real Friend 2, and Jack McGinn, your favorite is 5, so that's cool. My question of the week for you this week is, who would win in a fight? Smitty Werben Jaegerman Jensen from SpongeBob, or Joey Jojo Jr. Shabadoo from The Simpsons, both the overly long 9-syllable comic relief names? I'm sure Smitty is gonna win, seriously. Joey Jojo, such a wuss. But meet me tomorrow for, television propaganda, the commercial in As Seen on TV, and the job advertisement in Can You Spare a Dime. Goodbye for now.